Let's talk about the position of trade unions in 2022. As I just said a moment ago, you seem, Mick, mostly to get asked questions by people who either don't understand trade unions or are hostile to them. Some of what I'm about to say will hopefully strike a slightly different tone. Notwithstanding the fact that the way this summer has played out and support for the rail strikes has been higher, it seems, than a lot of people have expected, and people asking you the sorts of questions that Kay Burley did have been wrong-footed, it remains the case that the proportion of UK workers who are trade union members is about 23%. I think it's the government statistics say anyway that that's the lowest union membership rate on record among UK workers. But I wonder whether the trade unions decline or the fact that very often the trade unions seem to be stuck in this position might say something about the big established trade unions in particular and the need to do things differently. So you've said in your interviews a lot, I've heard you say this, we've been too passive, right? And I wonder what you mean by that.
Well, we've been too passive in industrial relations terms. There hasn't been enough disputes, frankly, and some of the unions haven't exercised their power. They've been too cosy, and some of them have been waiting too long by putting policy papers forward, by pleading with people to do them a favour, and these favours aren't getting done. So that means people are getting paid worse and worse wages every year, and their conditions are being stripped out. We've got to be a bit insurgent. We've got to go back to the communities and start from the bottom. On the estates, with the low paid, with the non-paid and the unorganised and the disorganised, because we've got to go back really into the communities where there isn't work even, or where the work is very fractured, and find a way to say, we are the unions, here's our flag, here's our centre, running campaigns along with tenants associations, renters associations, environmental groups, and not necessarily saying in the first instance we're here to organise your workplace.
No.
We're here to help you organise in general, where we've got to find a way for workers, ordinary men and women around this country, young people and new activists who are not necessarily young, people in their 40s and 50s in this country, haven't been in organisations, haven't been in the Scouts, haven't been in the church, haven't been in the mosque. All these places where you would get organisation, working class credentials of being a committee member and all that stuff that is actually essential and makes your life better in the long term.
At the moment, I mean, I write about and cover trade unions quite a bit by the standards of journalism, and when I write about disputes at the sort of cutting-edge, precarious end of the economy, I tend not to be writing about the big unions. I'm writing about these little unions, like the IWGB is a good example, who organise bike couriers and delivery drivers and people like that. And the big unions don't seem to be there.
No, so I don't think they have been, but I completely agree with Mick that there is a massive opportunity. And actually, the agenda that I found most exciting that I've heard coming up the union movement is exactly that, going back to organising. Because in the end, my view is that the kind of scale of change that we need to achieve, we won't do it until people mobilise and make that change happen, because our politics is really broken. And there's huge mobilisation and organising capacity of the unions to go in there and actually make people's causes their causes.
But you'd have to change, would you not, the basis on which trade unions work? Because there's some of them, most of them arguably, are still stuck in the old-fashioned world whereby you organise via the workplace, and there's a rep and a convener in the workplace. Now, in a world in which people hold down 2 or 3 jobs at once, or in the course of a year or two might have 5 or 6 different jobs, that model of organisation doesn't work anymore, does
You have
it?
to keep doing a bit of that. And in many workplaces, there is an in-house workforce, like the NHS, doctors, nurses, clinicians, and there is an outsourced workforce, the caterers, cleaners, and other suppliers. They've got to mentor the others, and often they are people from migrant background, certainly in the big cities. That's not true all over the country. So interestingly, our next campaign in the RMT, which we want to get the big general unions on board, is about cleaners and ancillary workers, that in-work poverty and lack of dignity and respect. And I tell you, most black workers in London, where I meet, in the low-paid sector, they say it's not only wages. I want some dignity off these people because they treat me like a piece of dirt all of the time. So we've had that. We've had really bad situations where we've organised a lot of African workers and the companies deliberately brought in Eastern European workers next, made all those Eastern European, the foremen and the supervisors, and put a wedge between us. We've got to get across all of that stuff as well, which is really old-fashioned stuff that they used to do to English and Irish workers, Catholics and Protestants in other eras. We've got to get round all that stuff.
There is an issue, isn't there, Mick, and forgive me saying this, about the face the big unions present to the public, which in the context of the fact that the precarious workers you're talking about very often are women and people of colour, that the public face the unions present really is still far too white and male, isn't it?
Yeah, we struggle with that, and we struggle with that in my union. I mean, look at me and look at my predecessors, and most of the people in the positions of influence. We are changing. We've got women organisers and black people on our executive now, but it's very slow. But we don't
slow.
We don't recruit the people in the workplace. So train drivers are invariably white. Right. It's very difficult for us to change that. The employment practices haven't changed.
Yeah, who's doing it right on that score and the other score that we talked about organising more precarious workers? Where do you see signs of inspiration?
I think some of the really new insurgent unions are doing really well. And, they're providing a bit of a challenge. I mean, we did some work where we were working with some of them in the big unions, and it was a struggle to get them round the table together. But actually, to be fair to the likes of RMT, CWU, I think they've recognised that there is an alliance to be built. They've also recognised that actually there are models of organising that they can adopt from some of these small insurgent unions. So, I mean, I think that has to be the direction, because I think the country needs the trade union movement more than it has ever needed the trade union movement.
Right, on that note, we will pause momentarily